if you understand the way government contracts are negotiated and priced, you'll realize that the government is actually paying double interest on its contracts. Because when people bid for government tenders, they already price the prospect of delayed payment, which is regarded as one of the commercial risks in the contract. So actually, the fact that there will be delayed payment is already priced and is already in the contract. And then when the delay occurs, there's further recalculation and further additional funding to pay for those delayed payments. So we are actually ending up paying double. And I think this needs to be addressed, and there's been attempts to address it, but not very effectively. Because if you look at the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act as well as the PFM Act, there is a requirement that you cannot contract if you do not have a budget, if you do not have the source of funds, if they are not clearly marked and ring-fenced. Yet, we still end up not paying, simply because we do not follow our budgets. And the solution to this is ineffective implementation of that particular requirement in the PFM Act as well as the Public Procurement and Asset Disposal Act, by holding those officers responsible. Those who have signed contracts or those who are supposed to make the payments and do not do so. But most importantly, we need to find out how to ring fence, and I think the committee should do some additional work, how to ring fence debts that are due and payable on government contracts from arbitrary budget cuts. I think we need to hear from the committee what their recommendations are on that particular area. And also, the committee should come up with some very innovative ways of managing government debt. In the private sector, we have something called factoring, where debts are sold at discounted rates instead of keeping them in your books. I think the committee should investigate how some element of factoring can be introduced to government debt, where those debts would be then sold out to those who are willing to pay them at a discounted rate, and then supported by issue of maybe long-term government paper in terms of treasury bills to support whoever's been able to take up those debts. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I would like to point out that there is a misconception, or maybe I didn't get it correctly, that the Office of the Attorney General is responsible for commercial terms on government contracts. I did spend the first 9 years of my life there. The responsibility for commercial terms in government contracts lie with the Treasury. So I think the institution that we need to deal with to get reasonable commercial terms is Treasury. And how should we do that? If you look at our Constitution under Chapter 12, we have some framework for public finance. We have some principles. But we don't have a legislative framework for government commercial terms. I think it is time, maybe the committee should take this up and help us develop the rails of what constitute reasonable commercial terms. If they can have some legislative amendments either to the PFM Act, so where we said very clearly that in entering into a contract, the Treasury will be bound by the following parameters in achieving reasonable commercial terms. The Attorney General does not have that responsibility. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, there's also been a lot of complaint about what we call commitment charges. But I think there's also lack of understanding in this area. Commitment charge is a norm in commercial contracts, and Kenya cannot run away from it, even us as individuals when we go to our banks. Why? What is the basis? Once you go to an institution, a lending institution, and they commit to lend you money, they reserve that money. In other words, they've taken it out of their daily use, they can't lend it to somebody else, and there's a cost to that. So you are required to pay some commitment if you have not made a drawdown. Yeah? And that commitment charge is supposed to be an incentive to you to fulfill the condition precedent for effectiveness of your loan agreement. And so the challenge is not with the commitment charge. The challenge is with the borrower. It is the borrower who is supposed to timeously implement the conditions of effectiveness, but also to implement the project in a timeous manner and make drawdowns so that you don't pay commitment charge. And I think the solution there is in, again, dealing with with Treasury in particular, and the line ministries that are implementing donor-funded projects. It is the same thing with power purchase agreements, where people have a lot of problems with what we call take or pay principle or availability charge. These are normal commercial terms that are supposed to incentivize the parties to be timely in the execution of the projects that are underlying in their contracts. Take or pay or availability charge: if I've built a power plant, made it available, and you're not off-taking my power, yet have capacity investment, capital investment, you pay for that. And that is why it is separated from energy charge. Mr. Honorable Speaker, let me also talk about this other issue of strengthening the Office of the Auditor General. This, I think, we need to really do, and I hope the report has made some very serious recommendations on how to empower the Office of the Auditor General with modern tools. In audit, the most effective tool is the ability to trace the money. And I hope in that report, or if it is not there, maybe they will think about it, how to empower, not necessarily by adding additional staff, but by empowering the Office of the Auditor General by IT tools, and that will enable it to trace the movement of money. That way, you will clearly get into a lot of information, but also empowering the auditor further and making sure the legal framework gives them right of access to information anywhere, including the private sector, not just within the public sector. I hope there are some recommendations in that regard. But let me also note, while I support the report, that I'm a little surprised. I was expecting there would be some heavy scandals exposed, but I've had just 6 million, 300 million. I thought there could be something. Maybe I've not seen the report, but I hope there are some heavy hitting scandals that we can talk about. With those few remarks, Honorable Speaker, I support and I acknowledge the good work done by my good brother, the chairman, and members of that committee. Thank you very much.
Honorable Bonzirai.